Welcome to Leaders and Learners. My name is Tanya McKenzie, and you can find me at the intersection of public relations and leadership. Join us as we talk to organizational leaders, elected officials, experts, authors, artists, and personalities, sharing their stories, talking about how they got to where they are and how they continue to learn and lead the way. So without further ado, let's get into it. Greetings, good people. Always good to have you back for another edition of Leaders and Learners, where we all know that the best leaders are lifetime learners. You should know what that means by now, right? Like, I don't know everything. I'm still doing all the things to learn as much as I can and improve my well being and improve the way that I do my job. There are people out there that actually go and seek better. Can you believe that? Oh my God. I hope you're one of them. And I hope that's why you're here, because you know that you're going to leave with gems that will help you do better in work, family, with your friends and your community, all that good stuff. All of those things. You should always be looking to improve how you relate to others. That's my PR right there, public relations, how you relate to your public. So, with that being said, I'm going to bring you someone today that is going to help you kind of process that and why leadership is so important. I think we forget that. Sometimes we're just like, oh, I'm doing my thing. I don't need any more leadership development. But who stops being a better human? Like, how do you just decide, I'm good? I'm good how I am. Like, I know I'm good, but I'm still going to make sure that I try to do better because we can always do better. So be human, lead human. We're going to talk about leadership with heart. Again, that's how you lead wherever you are, in what spaces you reside in, where you plant your seeds, and also where you grow. Let's welcome Ms. Jennifer, Dr. Jennifer Nash, the author of Be Human, Lead Human. Hello, ma'am. How are you?
I'm good, Tanya. How are you today?
I'm so excited to have you here, y'all. In case you didn't know, we put this off for a while. You probably saw some notifications about Jennifer coming on the show, maybe, I don't know, June, but we're here now. So I'm super excited to have this conversation because I think we get so detached from the heart of the work that we do, whether it's in our occupations or in our families or in our communities. We get so stuck on the task, how we're doing, if we're getting the accolades, but we disconnect from the heart of the work that we're supposed to do. So sometimes that's why I really loved your book. I love the premise of it, and I'm just glad you are here to share with us today. So I want you to jump right into why this book and why now.
Why this book? I think there's a huge opportunity for leaders to rethink and redefine the role of a leader in this new world of work. And the book couldn't be better time to address that as, we're coming out of the COVID pandemic and things are sort of getting back to a new normal. I think there's always an idea that leaders have to show up as this professional persona at work, as if they are leaving like half of themselves at the door before they walk in, right? That personal side. Because we often hear, this division between, oh, well, it's personal and professional. And I invite listeners to think about, we're all one people. We don't just artificially divide ourselves when we walk in the door at work. So, how do we bring all of ourselves to what we're doing? And how do we show up with heart and lead in a way that is authentic and genuine to us and the people around us can feel it?
So this book was an idea post COVID, or was it during COVID? Like, talk to me about how you got here because
Yeah, so the book actually, I started doing the research for the book back in 2014 when I started my PhD program. And, the book evolved throughout that time frame. And I continued doing research after I graduated. And it took a couple years to, compile all of that, gather it all together, theme it, analyze it, and really look at what was happening in the current cultural context as well. And as I looked at that, it became apparent that there was an opportunity to create perhaps a new paradigm of how we think about leadership for this new world of work. And I framed that with the research that I had and created what's called the Humans Framework, which is in the book.
Tell us a little bit more about that, the human framework.
Yeah. So the humans framework is set up to address the universal human needs that we all have, right? There's psychological needs that we all have when we're going through life. We want to be seen. We want to be heard. We want to be understood. We want to feel that we matter. We want to feel that we add value. And we want to be appreciated for not only just what we provide to organizations, the totality of our output of work, but just appreciated as a human being, as someone who has a lot of skills and talents and hopes and dreams that make the world a better place.
So you're kind of talking about emotions right now. The human needs that you're connecting this with are all pretty much emotional, right?
Mhm.
And we're in a time now where people are like, I don't need nobody. I got this. I can handle it. I can do this. We don't need to be friends at work in order for me to get my job done.
Yeah.
So how do you even address the pushback, the natural pushback, the current pushback of the premise of the book? Because that is where we are too. It's like,
Mhm.
no, I don't need you to love me in order for us to work together. I don't need you to like
Mhm.
us in order for my tasks to get accomplished. Like how do
Mhm.
you address that?
Mhm. I think it speaks to this concept of removing the humanity from the workplace, is
Mhm.
what I hear you saying when you talk about that, right? I don't need a friend at work. I don't need anybody to, pat me on the back. I just want to get the work done and leave. And I think it reduces us to less than human beings when we're talking about ourselves that way. I feel like, when we look back at Taylor, right, back in the early, 20th century with Taylor, who was he was a mechanical engineer, and he wanted to look at what was the best way to approach a task, right? He was very concerned with optimizing efficiency. And so he decided that he would do some time and motion studies to figure out what was the best way to do a task. How fast could that task be accomplished? And his heart was in the right place. He wanted to maximize revenue for the organization, and he wanted to maximize income for the worker. But an unintended consequence of that was that it took away autonomy, and it took away voice, and it took away choice for employees to decide how and when and where and why they wanted to work in the best way that worked for them. And so we 100 years later are still dealing with this division of, management and workers, from personal and professional, from workers having say over how they perform their work, with, leaders wanting people to come back in the office, right? They want to go back to that status quo of having everybody back in the office, controlling that. And so this book is an opportunity for those leaders to rethink that. How do we bring that human element of work back to the forefront? Because it's been gone for so long. And what COVID did was it showed us that there is a human element to work. We can't ignore that. It's all people that create the culture in an organization. So we may not want best friends at work, or we may not want to build relationships with people at work, but that doesn't mean that we can't be humane to one another and we can't treat each other with respect and kindness and empathy and compassion.
Here's my question. Like many things post COVID, they seem to be fleeting, right? So when COVID happened and we first came out of COVID, everyone wanted to be sensitive to feelings, and we got very active in mental health and
Mhm.
healthcare and taking care of each other. And then maybe we should rethink maternity leave because now we recognize how difficult it can be to leave
Mhm.
your job. Like all these great things, DEI work, let's
Yeah.
be equal. And now that we've been out of COVID for a while, there are there are policies that are fleeting, just like those thoughts.
Mhm.
How do you address, or what are your thoughts to how we, oh God, re-engage in that passionate level of humanity and concern for one another? Because it seems, it's good. Go get
Mhm.
your book. They'll be like, she's right. we should do this and that.
Mhm.
We're going to have these new policies. And then it gets a little less passionate. And
Mhm.
some of those things tend to go away, even
Mhm.
when numbers show that having these types of humane policies
Mhm.
lead to more productivity and
Mhm.
profitability. I
Yeah.
don't understand how leaders see in their numbers how this benefits them, but will still resist these types of policies or culture changes in their companies.
Mhm. Mhm. It's a great question. I think that as existing leaders today, they role model behavior that they learned, right? We're human beings. So the way we learn is we mimic. And what we see in the world around us is what we emulate. And there is an opportunity to choose what behavior you want to demonstrate and to choose what kind of leader you want to be. If you want to be that command and control leader who tells people what to do and micromanages and has terrible attrition and has terrible morale and doesn't have business unit performance where it needs to be, you can go right ahead. That causes other problems, but you have a choice. And you can say, well, how is this working for me today? How are the behaviors that I'm exhibiting in the workplace? How are they helping my team perform at its best? How are they delivering performance that the company is looking for? And if they're not, then maybe that's an opportunity to ask yourself a question and say, well, maybe there's a different way. And what if I tried this different way? In the book, I talk about the example of Alan Mulally, leading Ford Motor Company. When he took over Ford Motor Company, there was, infighting, there was, no communication. The company was extremely siloed. It was a very difficult environment to be working in at the time. And, Alan instituted this policy of, look, we're going to collaborate, we're going to work together, and we're going to build one Ford back. And, by the time he left the organization 8 years later, he had increased the stock price by 1,837%.
Mm.
He had increased engagement by over 50% to, a 90% engagement rate. That's unheard of. And he did it by putting people first and prioritizing people rather than prioritizing profits and prioritizing shareholders. And, I think there's a lesson to be learned in that. Could the leader that came in after Allen have chosen to continue leading in that same way, where he was demonstrating behaviors that prioritized people and emphasized working together? Yes, he could have. Is that what happened? Look at the results and you tell me.
Absolutely.
So I think we're talking about a choice, right?
A choice by
Yeah.
leadership.
Yeah,
So
people can choose how they want to behave.
how do you advise employees that are not in leadership to receive
Mhm.
the information that you are putting out there in your thought leadership?
Mhm. Yeah, so if the question is around how do employees use this information in their lives and leadership and careers, I would say this is a unique opportunity for them to decide what they want that life and leadership and career to look like. You know, it's no longer a heads down, my work will speak for itself kind of environment. You need to drive your own career and you need to decide what you want out of that. And this book gives you a roadmap to help you determine that if that is unclear for you. And so once you're understanding what that looks like and where you want to go, then you can decide how you want to get there and look for organizations that meet the criteria that you've identified for yourself. Will this be a good fit? Sort of like Tinder. Are you going to swipe right or swipe left? Like, which one's going to work for you? Because it has to go both ways. And there are some organizations that won't be a good fit depending on what your goals are. So I always encourage, younger professionals and people starting out, get that internal GPS, understand where it is that you want to go, what you want that experience to look like, and define what the key indicators of success are for you. And then go after that and find an organization that can support you in helping you get there.
It's funny because people will be like, "Oh, I want to be successful." Well, what does success look like to you?
Right. Exactly.
But this book hit home in the way that you are working with others. It hit home a lot when I reflected on many of the moms that I spoke with and dealt with during COVID, they were struggling.
Yeah.
And I listen to you talk and think about your book in a way to where I want to go back and tell them, like, your home is your business, and how you
Yeah.
run that matters. Like,
Yes.
how you actually lead in your household could potentially rid yourself of some of these struggles that you are having, or challenges that you
Mhm.
didn't even recognize were challenges until you got in this situation. But when the business structure is off, you are going to have to think differently and process and operate differently if you want it better. You can't continue to do the same thing
Yeah.
and the same way you were doing it and think that you're going to get a different result. And you stand over there wanting to pull your hair out and don't know which way to go. I thought about the book and I was like, there's definitely some gems in here for moms that
Mhm.
struggle in their own household. So I don't know. What are your thoughts
Yeah.
about
Yeah, absolutely. I've actually had a lot of moms come to me and talk about the fact that, wow, like this could actually be like a roadmap for me to help to help, emulate the role model the behaviors I want my kids to have, right? Or help myself understand, where are my guardrails? Where are my boundaries? And what do those look like for me? And like you said, during COVID, when I'm having challenges in that way, maybe there are things that need to shift and change in my external environment so that I can be more aligned with that internal environment and create that sense of peace and comfort for myself.
Yeah, so for any mom out there that's struggling, sometimes you got to look at your household
Mhm.
through the eyes of someone else, right?
Yeah.
Look, get an objective view on how you can run a household or a family
Mhm.
or even an organization if if you're participating or you have leadership in a community organization.
Mhm.
Same as if it was a business.
Yeah.
You need heart, especially when you're dealing with people, constituents, your
Mhm.
audience, your community.
Mhm.
These are humans. And sometimes we forget that when we're barking out orders or, being held accountable too.
Yes.
And I think maybe that's where the struggle comes in. When people know that they're being held accountable, they lose the humane part of it and just
Mhm.
focus on the task at hand, the to do list,
Mhm.
right?
Yes.
So,
Yes. And I think that's a default, right? We're so often task oriented that we forget about the bigger picture, that we are dealing with humans. And the phrase, like, you catch more bees with honey or whatever it is.
yes.
If we go about, we have actions that we choose to take, and that's what we do. Our behaviors are how we choose to implement those actions. And we have lots of choices when it comes to the behaviors that we choose.
So you're telling me shut up and just do it? That's not.
Well, that is one choice. And
Just shut up and get it done. No, that's not it. That's not how we communicate.
yeah, I liken it sometimes to, like, having a 2-year-old, right? And how often do 2-year-olds do what you tell them? They,
Hardly ever.
yeah.
Unless you
So
walk
it's
them through it and you explain, because they're going to ask you 5,000 questions
yeah,
about and why,
yep.
right? Sometimes you do have to deal with adults as if they were children. Like, dummy it down like I'm a third grader.
Mhm.
That if that gives them what they need, even though you might feel like, I don't feel like doing that. I shouldn't have to do that in order to get this done.
Yeah.
Sometimes a little TLC will take you places.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and sometimes it's just the fact that, like, you take the time to say, "Look, I know that this doesn't make a whole lot of sense, and I would be frustrated too," right? It's sort of establishing that, like, you get where they're coming from. You understand their perspective and you hear them and you're acknowledging it. And oftentimes people just want to be heard. They want to know that you get them. And even if they don't want to do what you're asking them to do, that little piece of, like, empathy and helping them understand that you hear them and that that perspective matters to you is what it takes to be able to get them to go forward and say, okay, you know what? I know this person's got my back. I know they understand me. I'm going to just go ahead and get this done.
Tell me about your book writing process. Let me know, like, how was that for you? Because you said you started when you were doing your dissertation and then
Mhm.
you got into it. And I know personally that completing a book project is not easy. So
Yeah.
talk to me about that.
Yeah. Well, I started collecting the data, in 2014, but I didn't actually start writing the book until like 2019.
Mm,
And I'll tell you, like, first of all, writing a book is a completely different experience than writing a dissertation. It's a
mm,
completely different style, completely different objectives. And so it took me a while to figure out how I wanted to outline and structure the book. I went through 4 outlines and trashed them all. And I
wow.
went through 3 drafts of the book and trashed that. And I finally got to a point where I was like, oh, this feels right. This feels like I like the structure. I like how I'm going to share. I open each chapter with a story so that people can, read that and sort of take away pieces from that resonate for them and bring it to life in that way. And I close each chapter with some, key takeaways so that if they're just looking to pop into a chapter and pop out, they can do that. If they want to read the book the whole way through, they can do that. If they're using it for an MBA course and they want to reference some different leadership topics, there's a list of curated resources in the back. So, my goal with the book was really to make it evergreen, that it's a resource for young professionals, for people who are mid-career, for seasoned executives, for moms who are looking for different ways to figure out what do those boundaries and direction look like. It applies to so many different areas and audiences. And I think, in the writing of the book, the tone came through that like I wanted it to be more conversational as opposed to like, an academic piece or like a dissertation. And so it took me a while to find that writing style.
Mm.
But I think once I did, the book started to flow. And
Okay.
it took me about 3 years to write the book itself. Yeah, it
It's
took
a
quite a
great
while.
piece. It's a great piece. What
Thank
was the most difficult for you? What was the most emotional or just the hardest to process for you?
About the book writing process.
Yes.
Oh, there were so many times that like I just wanted to stop because it was really, really hard. I mean, it's one of the hardest things I've ever done. And at some points, like, I didn't know if it was really worth it. I didn't know if anybody was going to read the book. I didn't know if it was going to matter to anybody. And for something that I had spent so much time on and invested so much money and, invested so much heart and soul, um, it's hard to know and hard to find that faith when you're not sure how it's going to be received and you're not sure how it's going to work out in the end. And I think that was one of the hardest things for me was, when it was really dark to keep going because I wasn't sure what was going to happen.
Yeah. Yeah. So tell us, what's next for you? Are you touring? Like how people
Mhm.
can get in touch with you and stay connected to you and the work that you are doing.
Yeah. Well, I'm setting up some different, speaking events and conferences for next year. So there's that. If people want to find out more about, what I do and how I do it, they can go to my website, which is drjennifernash.com. That's drjennifernash.com. And if they're interested in picking up a copy of the book, they can do that at Amazon. And I also have some free chapters available on my website if they'd like to check it out that way beforehand.
Oh, wow. Cool. Very cool, ma'am.
Mhm.
Very cool. Well, we want to thank you for coming and speaking with us finally about the book. I'm so glad to be in your presence. I think you are brilliant and I
Mhm.
appreciate you and the work that you're doing because it matters. Many times we get so caught up in the to-dos
Mhm.
and the to don'ts that we forget to just love and be human. And sometimes that actually gets the job done so much easier, right?
Mhm.
But it's vulnerability. I think people fight the
Yeah.
vulnerability of being emotional with others.
Mhm.
So, don't be afraid, y'all. Just do it scared. Be vulnerable and be your best. So thank you,
Mhm.
Jennifer, for being here. Appreciate you. And know that if you're touring, if you're out here in California, please let's get together. If you have something you want me to share, I'm more
Mhm.
than happy to do it. Once you've been on our show, we are always a part of the Leaders and Learners family, the Sand and Shores family, please share with us so we can share with our audience.
I will do that. Thank you so much for having me, Tanya. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. All right, guys. Thank you for being here for Miss Jennifer, and we will see you back here soon. Hey, thanks for showing up to the podcast where we all know that the best leaders are lifetime learners. When you get a sec, take a moment, leave a comment. What you think about today's episode, and share it with someone that you know could use the gems that were dropped today. Follow and subscribe. You don't want to miss who's coming up next. You never know who could show up here and what they could say. For your professional needs, marketing, PR, communications, and leadership, make sure you follow us on all social media platforms at Sand and Shores, or hit us up at sandandshores.com. Again, thanks so much for showing up. We appreciate you, and we'll see you soon.